Well, folks, the seasons are definitely changing and it is definitely feeling more fall like here in Durham, North Carolina. So the weather is definitely changing and that is a good thing. So definitely always enjoyable when the weather becomes a little bit more cooler and a little bit more fall like. And sometimes it can also create some weather that is also not the best. I know that yesterday I woke up to thunderstorms that were happening like around midnight or something along those lines. But it does look like Ian, which is a hurricane, is strengthening as it heads toward Cuba, and Florida is bracing for floods. So that is one of the things that is going on in the news. So definitely, folks are paying attention to that kind of thing that goes on in the world and all along those lines. And we do know that even as those things are happening, other things are happening in the world as well. And sometimes those things are even impacted by the weather and all in that space. Because one of the stories that I was hearing about was that there are always, not just here in the US, but all over the world, definitely controversial referendum on things like even gay marriage. So definitely, apparently, they were having a high stakes referendum on that and other family rights on Sunday, and they downplayed preparations as Tropical Storm Ian approached, even as projections for the storm have it hitting the western side of the island as a Category 2 hurricane on Tuesday. So, although the eye of the storm will likely pass to the west of Havana itself, the Cuban capital will be on the eastern or dirty side of the storm and will likely experience higher hurricane force winds and heavy rains. Havana is in the low-lying coastal area and is in a significant risk of flooding if hit by those torrential rains or storm surges. But definitely, folks there, just like they are in the U.S., we're told to prepare for the storm and definitely be ready for it and all along those lines. But apparently, even though there's a storm coming down to Cuba, folks have been focusing on the ongoing referendum vote. So apparently, there is a referendum about that kind of things because they are saying that they're going to have a new family a new law code that will be approved unanimously. Why am I not surprised that it would be a unanimous vote in a country that is known for being somewhat of a dictatorial kind of government? But the referendum on a family code would allow gay marriage and surrogacy pregnancies, among other things, is being held after strong opposition voiced by religious groups and activists reluctant to participate in what the government has also portrayed as a vote in support of socialism. So they are saying that they want to have this as a vote with and in support of socialism. So I'm sure that Shaquille's going to have some thoughts around that, as well as one of the other news stories that I heard, which is another part of the world, which is in Italy. Because I did hear that Italy had recently elected what some people are saying is one of the furthest right governments in history in that sense. So I'm going to learn more about that and also learn what our esteemed folks that are on our panel have to say about this as well. Because, like I said, Steve is not here, but he did tell me that he'll be back on tomorrow and all of that. But definitely, they're saying that the Italy election victors are targeting areas of political stability, and that Italy has elected the most far right government. This is their words, not mine, since World War, I believe they were saying two. But I will doubly check that particular statement and see what folks have got to say, as definitely a lot of things are happening in the world, not just here in the United States, that have to do with politics and the way that folks decide that they want to lead their life and all along that space. So it'll be interesting to see what my esteemed panelists have to say about these discussions and other discussions as I learn more about it as well. But definitely going to bring up folks so they can share their thoughts and what's going on in in that space. So, like I said, I'm going to try to bring up Shaquille and see what he's got to say about it, as well as others that might want to add their comments also. That's where we're going with some of the news stories that I'm seeing, and I'm sure there'll be others. I'm waiting to hear from Sasha as to what's going on in Russia and other places. But I'm going to first bring up Shaquille because I do know that Shaquille follows a lot of the politics of the world, even more so than I do. So I want to hear what he's got to say about what's going on in Italy as well as in Cuba, where where apparently they're having discussions around family values, which I find kind of interesting to be coming from Cuba and all along those lines. But definitely, what are some of your thoughts? And have you been hearing any of these news stories? And do you have any insights that you want to add? And maybe Dr. Dan Worthington wants to add some as well. So definitely just want to know what folks' thoughts were as I had pulled up most of those news stories and wanted to know what people's kind of impressions were of these countries. Because Italy, and I actually, as I think about it, one country is historically been known as a more country from the right. I think historically has always been one from the right, which is Italy, and definitely Cuba has been always to the left. And apparently they are definitely doing some interesting political moves in their own countries. And of course, we know a lot of stuff is happening here in the United States as well. Shaquille, I'm gonna turn it over to you after that brief opening, and that's where I kind of like
Well,
went at the beginning.
you said a lot, so I'm not sure what specifically you want me to comment on. But if the weather's changing and you're saying it's a good thing, I thought the weather changing was a bad thing. You've got a hurricane heading towards Cuba, so obviously another racist weather event that's deliberately bypassed the widest parts of America and is heading to a bunch of underprivileged socialists. And clearly, the only solution to this would be more taxes on the rich, so that government can spend it on our behalf, on themselves, and that will solve all problems. Would that be
Well, hold on a second. Since you went there, and since you said I didn't direct the question enough, I will redirect the question to borrow from Steve and the lawyer talk and all of that. But a lot of times in the U.S., and I know Dan will appreciate this as well, we always talk about family values and the need to strengthen the family and all
Do
along
we?
those lines. And apparently that's what Cuba is saying that they want to do with this whole thing around gay rights and all of that. So apparently Cuba's trying to have the same gay rights that we have here in the U.S. I'm not sure exactly what's going on in that space, but apparently they are having some things around surrogate parents and all of this. But it is definitely a dictatorship of a government and all of that. But apparently they want their people to have these different rights that I know we oftentimes fight for in the U.S. as well.
Well, I don't know why. Well, why do people think this? If you have government in charge of every facet of your life, you don't have any rights. The government makes decisions for you. If you're into socialism, that's what you're after, right? You're going to act like a little toddler, and the government will tell you everything: what to wear, when to wear it, when to stand, when to sit, when to eat, to whom you can marry, if you can marry at all, how many children you can have, if you can have any at all. They will dictate every part of your life. Don't sit there and then tell me, oh, but my rights, my rights. What rights? You gave up all those rights for the security of knowing that people like AOC will make decisions over every facet of your life. Now, it's not our fault that you don't listen to us and you've lost your mind, right? But just remember, as a very good a friend of ours has said, if you can vote yourself into socialism, but you'll need people like Dan and I to fight your way out.
So, what's your take on this and everything? Because apparently, they're even saying in various news stories, including some from the right and the left, that this is a unusual thing coming from Cuba and everything, because apparently they have approved same-sex marriage in an unusual referendum. And a lot of times there are countries that are very repressive in their government, and particularly have been from the left that have been very repressive. But apparently the family code, which reforms and expands the family law that was in force since 1975, contemplates equal marriage, surrogacy, the adoption of children by homosexual couples, the prohibition of child marriage, and even the promotion of comprehensive policies to address gender violence. So it sounds like they're trying to have some of these same conversations that, as Shaquille would say, are woke conversations there in Cuba and all along those lines.
It sounds to me like exactly the reason I didn't actually go into law, because you have to learn another language, right? You have to learn Latin and a little bit of Greek to understand these sort of terms they have. It's taken me all I can do to go, they're suspending habeas corpus. What the hell does that mean? Why do they need to start speaking in Latin all of a sudden, right? Just to make these lawyers feel good about themselves. And I can say critical things about lawyers because I'm not a lawyer. So I don't have to, sit for the bar and then not be able to say anything bad about the profession. Sorry, Dad. So this is why
I'm retired.
this is why I'm not into wokeness, because you've kind of got to be on the lookout for things like gender violence. You think, wow, what is gender violence? Well, gender
violence against women.
Having an opinion, you as much as having an opinion that doesn't agree with somebody else's, that's violence. Or you're not speaking up, because silence is violence. I mean, come on, like you try to decipher all of this nonsense that's just sort of constantly spewed forth, ad nauseum from the media and from the left, and sometimes from the right. These people that just come up with all these different terms, and Nancy Pelosi doing this recent interview with what's his name from CNN, as she's walking along trying to show how fit she is, and saying that Donald Trump and the Republicans, they're trying to decertify elections. Like, really? Where did they try to decertify an election? It's a threat to democracy if they win. Well, it was a threat to democracy if they won last time, right? And they won, and democracy still exists. There was a threat in 2016. Nothing happened. America still exists. May not exist the same way as it used to once, but it's still there. The people are still there. So, people just get too flustered about things that don't matter.
Well, like I said, people have different thoughts and all that. I definitely want to hear what Dan's thoughts are about this part of the world and all, because it's not that far. It's like literally off our coast and everything. But, apparently this code is also going to allow surrogate pregnancies and broader rights for grandparents. So I know maybe my own parents who are grandparents might like that, because it's going to give them broader rights in regards to grandchildren on that little island nation, and the protection of the elderly, and measures against gender violence. So it does sound like they are trying to reach out and show how liberal they are down there in Cuba.
What does that mean? What does protections for gender balance? What does that mean?
My guess is that it's going to be that they're going to say sometimes have the police and some of their other law enforcement discourage literally men from beating up on their wives, and vice versa, because there are some wives that can totally take care of their own selves and can totally beat up their husbands.
When was the last time you saw an anti-domestic violence ad that was targeted at women saying, "Please don't beat your husbands up"?
I'm sorry, that said what?
You just said it goes both ways, right?
I said it should go both ways.
When was the last time that you saw a domestic violence ad that was targeted at women saying, "Please don't be abusive to your men"?
I can't say that, but I'm hoping Nick will come back. But I've had some interviews.
Nick's right there. Have any of you guys ever seen an ad that said, "Women, stop being bitches and stop psyching out on your man"? Have you ever seen an ad like that?
I haven't. No, I have not seen that. But Nick, I do have a question for you that ties to what Shaquille just asked, because I've talked to some lawyer friends and some lawyers even on shows that are more acquaintances than friends, and they have said that they have seen a shift in the direction that courts go, because they said even here in the U.S. that it used to be pretty much a given that if there was a custody battle, or even some of these other battles, that it was going to be the woman that always got the custody, and that has changed, and that some of the other rules have changed more toward the middle. Like I said, these are their words, not mine. But I was wondering, as a lawyer, is that correct? Are we seeing more fairness in the court system in the sense of the way that they treat people that are both men and women, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's custody, or it's a number of other things? Because I've had three lawyers that have said that.
Let's just stop the question with that. Have you ever seen anything remotely resembling fairness in the court system in any country known to man?
Yeah, I think the concept of fairness is pretty much.
The court system isn't supposed to be fair. It's supposed to resolve disputes. Okay, right. Every person will say, "Well, it wasn't fair," if you're the loser. But the reason you have courts is to resolve disputes. In other words, people get into fights, and somebody has to make a decision. Somebody has to be the adult in the room, basically. Because if people were self-governing, which you believe, obviously, Shaquille, that we shouldn't have government, people will just govern themselves, and the world will be fine.
No, I'm not an anarchist. I am not an anarchist by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't need government to tell me every little thing about my life, like I'm not allowed to eat in a smoking area. I know that, hey, fair enough, I can't smoke in an eating area.
Yeah.
But why do you need to step in and say, well, look, you really shouldn't eat around people that smoke. So we're going to tell you that you can't do that thing. My mother doesn't tell me that. She doesn't like it, but she doesn't tell me when I can and can't.
You hit the wrong button.
Obviously. She doesn't tell me when I can.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to stop Shaquille, isn't it?
Yeah. But, you know, there's all sorts of different things that government wants to tell you that you can and can't do. What you can and can't do in your own house. In some parts, they tell you what color the walls can be in your house. Why does government need to sit down? Like, imagine the mentality of people. A group of people will sit down together and they think, oh, what are we going to do today? What useful, productive things can we do today? Oh, I know. Let's pass a law that dictates what color the walls can be inside the homes of other people. What kind of pathetic kind of person, some low esteem, power hungry, parasite would you have to be to come up with something like that?
That's fair.
There's all kinds of dumb laws here. Hold on a second. There's all kinds of dumb laws.
Hold on a second.
Including some that are laws.
Counselor, does that mean that government should not tell people about whether or not they should have an abortion?
That's clever. That's clever, Nick. Government absolutely has to weigh in on social issues, and that has to be reflected.
I see.
Which is why, Nick.
If
I can give you a little bit of, if I can give you just a little bit of schooling, because you obviously haven't read many of those books behind you, right? On how your government works, it is not for the judicial branch to pass legislation at the federal level. It is, you've got a couple of options. One, you either get the states to pass the laws that are reflective of the people there, or if you truly do believe that it should be a right that was enshrined in the Constitution and it's not clearly done, it's not clearly written there, then what you do is you ask for a constitutional amendment, okay? And you try to gather enough support so you get 60% of the states to agree, and bang, you go and pass those laws. What you do not do is circumvent and usurp the sovereignty of the parliamentary process, of the legislative process, by having the judicial branch pass laws on their behalf. That is an abuse of the system. And I mean, by the way, we could get into a whole different debate as to whether or not the Supreme Court even should have the third branch of government status, because that was not something that was originally planned. That was something that they kind of just announced and then made themselves a power. But given that is the system, it is certainly not the role or the place of the judicial branch to write and create legislation. That is not how it works. It's an abuse of the system to have.
Well, and that's what the majority of the court decided, that it was wrong from the beginning, and certainly it was. I mean,
I got it. So the judicial branch should not be interfering in abortion.
Yeah, and so it's up to the states to decide that.
You said, Counselor, that the government shouldn't tell you all the little things that you have to do or not have to do. So, Counselor, wouldn't you agree the government, and I'm not talking the judicial branch, I'm talking the legislative branch, should not regulate abortion? It should be between the woman and the doctor. Counselor.
Well, that's not even a position that you believe in, Nick.
I'm asking you, though, Counselor, would you believe, because you don't like government interference, that the government, and I'm talking about the legislative branch, should not weigh in on abortions?
No, I don't think so. I think that there needs to be some mechanism of control, as there is on.
Now there has to be a mechanism.
Hold on.
No, Counselor. Now you want mechanisms of control.
Okay. Let me finish.
I got it. I'm going to have a big drink after that.
Let me finish.
I'll wait.
Because it's the whole truth, not just part of the truth. That's used.
The whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Right.
I rest my case. We can discuss other things now.
So the government does have a role to play, and certainly, no matter how sort of anti-government you are, most libertarians would agree that the fundamental purpose of government is to restrain humans from hurting other humans, right? To make sure that contracts are enforced fairly, that sort of thing. To make sure that, hey, if you're imposing a cost on the wider community, you should pay for that. If you've poisoned the waterways, you should be responsible for that. And certainly the medical industry has to be somewhat regulated. Otherwise, where do you draw the line? Now, people who say the fetus is alive as soon as the heartbeat exists, or some people say it's alive as soon as it's conceived. Whatever, wherever you put the line. I don't think it is unreasonable for some people to have a view which is different to other people on this issue. And the government has to try to create laws which are as fair as possible. And I think that the as fair as possible means that they have to be available, they have to be safe, okay, they have to be legal, but they have to have some restrictions on them, because otherwise, for a lot of parents, I know that they'd prefer to have abortions 20 years post-birth.
Okay. So that's fair enough. So there are certain issues which obviously the government should weigh in on and invade people.
Well, there's a difference between the state and the federal government.
No, Nick. So you're very clever. Yeah, there is some issues. This is how you frame the question. There are some issues. You must have been hanging around Mark too long. There are some issues in which the government should weigh in on personal rights. There is no personal God-given right to an abortion. You know, when the rights were enumerated by the founding fathers of the United States and fought for by the Brits in the Magna Carta, they said that things like freedom of speech and freedom to life and liberty and all that were rights bestowed on human beings by God. Okay? I don't think God bestowed this right of abortion. So you call it a right. It's not a right. Okay? And in a lot of countries, it's not legal. So all that the Supreme Court has said is we, the Supreme Court, do not have the ability to create legislation. This needs to be passed back to the states. And as I've said, if you're not happy about it, try to pass legislation. I think it's a bad move, personally. I think like Lindsey Graham has tried to bring in anti-abortion laws, which I think is a terrible move. Why does he want to take Republicans down that path? That's not where most Republicans are. Most Republicans are not supporters of abortion being completely illegal, just like most Democrats are not supporters of abortion right up to the point of birth. That's just not where most people are. Most people have a much more moderate position on these issues. I'm not telling you where I stand on it, but what I will say is that the legislation should reflect the wider community's values on this issue. That's the correct way that government works, not where government imposes itself upon people against their will and starts telling them you can have this or that, or we're going to make an exemption. This is one of the things that's been suggested now because they're trying to tell everyone to eat insects, that they're going to make an exemption so that when you go and get meat products, a certain percentage of the meat products, the protein of those meat products can be derived from insects without you being informed of that. No. That's not what most people want. Government should not allow it.
But Shaquille, on that same line of thinking and a line of questioning and everything that Nick was bringing up to you and all of that, if there are things that are out there that have been approved and have been definitely changed and our mindsets have been changed and all of that, should we throw those back to the states as well? And I'll bring up the Loving case when, yes, I have had the pleasure of dating women of another race and all of that, but should that be thrown back to the states as well? Because I'm pretty sure that states like Alabama and Mississippi would not be all that in favorable of interracial relationships, whereas states that are more liberal like New York and California probably couldn't give a rat's ass.
Well, there's a difference between fundamental rights and stuff that's not. I mean, abortion isn't a federal right, right? Discrimination based on race is. And so, there's a difference, Mark. I mean, you have to be able so I can see, and the majority of the court decided that the abortion decision, Roe v. Wade, and subsequent decisions was not a jurisprudence-wise a correct decision. I happen to agree with that. I think it should be up to the states, and for them to figure out. I think the federal government should keep its nose out of that business, absent a constitutional right. But I also agree that there's no way in God's green earth that the abortion would be considered an inalienable right, because God himself wouldn't approve such. I mean, it's certainly not coming from God, right? So it has to be something that would be enumerated civilly through man, So so that's that.
But Dan, aren't there certain rules that we don't go after because for whatever reasons we have felt that the people have the rights to practice what? Hold on a second, the right to practice what
Mark,
they want, even though they are against the law. Because I do know for a fact that there are
constitutional
both in California
jurisprudence
and in Florida and in even Utah that practice a certain type of lifestyle that allows them to have multiple wives and multiple in some cases,
but that's not legal even in Utah. It's not legal in Utah.
Huh?
It's not
It's not legal, but it's not. But a lot of times they are left alone because it is part of their culture, whatever that culture is. I didn't name which ones I was talking about, but I know that there are ones that are out there that are not prosecuted because they feel that they are.
It's non sequitur.
Firstly, the Church of the Latter-day Saints has
It's not just the Church of the Latter-day Saints. There are churches down in Florida that are.
Let's not muck around. You're not talking about Catholics that live in Utah, right?
No, but I'm talking about the Muslims have similar rules. The Muslims have similar rules.
So, if you want to, the Church of the Latter-day Saints have gotten rid of the idea of polygamy a long time ago. But even some of those sects that still practice it don't get legal recognition. Okay, they just don't. So you can't, for example, one of the complaints from people that wanted to have gay marriage. Can I finish answering? One of the reasons that people that wanted to go into gay marriage were complaining was like, hey, we can't inherit certain assets because our marriage-like relationships are not recognized. Okay, and I think that's probably a reasonable complaint. Now, if you wanted to see the same thing happen with polygamists, you would have to see things like their retirement funds and all that be equally and proportionately split amongst their several wives. The laws don't allow for that. Okay, it's only there's only one legal wife which is recognized by law. The rest of them aren't recognized, even if they choose to live that way. So it's not the same thing. It's like trying to blame. It's like trying to say that you don't pay taxes. They most certainly do.
But Shaquille, you say it's not the same thing, but there is an activity. I'm not going to get into on a morning show and everything what I'm talking about, but there is an activity that I actually thoroughly enjoy when I'm in the middle of a relationship with a woman and everything, and that relationship is actually illegal in most of the states and all of that. But it's still illegal, and I'm not trying to have the police walk into the house and catch me in the act.
Lock them up.
Still illegal.
Well, isn't there an argument?
Well, now you have me curious.
Just hide behind your Fifth Amendment there, Mark, and don't broadcast that across international TV into 120 countries.
Isn't there an argument that the FLDS, which do practice polygamy, that are not being enforced, shouldn't they have the right to practice that if that's what they want to do? In other words, why are we prosecuting FDLS people?
I don't think anyone is right now.
Other than the fact that we have this Anglo-Christian right wing that you only have to be man.
Well, I think, Nick, in the case of child abuse and abuses, they are being prosecuted.
Child abuse, I would agree. But
I haven't seen anything like that recently. I don't think there's enforcement.
At the same time, the Western governments have made it, quote, illegal. Now, why would it be illegal and gay marriage not be illegal? That doesn't make any sense to me. It just hasn't gone.
Well, it's a different thing, Nick.
Why?
Well, that's right. But then, really, the correct way to solve that.
Basically,
I think it should be illegal. Gay marriage, I think it should be illegal.
You think gay marriage should be illegal?
Yeah. No, if states want to acknowledge contractual relationships, so they have because there's a difference between marriage and contractual relationships recognized by the state. If the state wants to recognize contractual relationships, such as between gay couples, that's up to them. I mean, but there's no fundamental right, shouldn't be a fundamental right to marriage between gay couples.
On that note,
well, it goes back to the whole idea of inalienable rights, right?
As it stands right now, okay, in every Western country that I'm aware of, if you want to get married, you actually have to apply for a marriage license.
Yes.
Now, a license is permission granted to you by government to do something that would otherwise be illegal, right? Like a driver's license. If you don't have one, you're not legally allowed to drive on public roads. As far as I'm concerned, what business is it of governments? Now, I will accept the argument that, when they started to say, look, because in America and across the Western world, as recently as the 40s and 50s, it was quite common to see girls as young as 12 getting married, right? And so they started to say, look, maybe we should raise the marriage age, and it went to 14, then it went to 16, etc. Okay, I can understand that you want to put some limits in. Maybe you want to, try to control things like, brothers marrying sisters and other interfamilial relationships, but for all other intents and purposes, why on earth does the government need to get involved that you actually have to apply for permission? This goes back to the old kings, where they used to be able to take the first bride and they had their way with her before you got her. This is a relic of a system that shouldn't exist. You should be able to marry whoever you like, as far as I'm concerned.
I think marriage is an inalienable right between a man and a woman, because that would be a marriage sanctioned by God. But would a marriage being sanctioned by two people of the same sex be sanctioned by God? Likely not, because it's unnatural.
I don't think, Dan, that you get to impose your belief.
It's not.
Religious
it's
belief.
not my belief. It's. I mean, read the Bible, okay? I didn't make.
You're telling me to read the Bible of all people? Come on, Dad.
Well, and read whatever you want to read. Read it. I don't really care. Every major religion has come down on this the same way, pretty much. Right,
until our latest woke pope has decided to become woke. But
he's decided to poop out. But what can I say?
At the end of the day, when America first started off, right, one of the big issues that you had was all these different religious sects that used to fight with each other, until finally government said, look, you have the right to practice your own religion. This is part of the First Amendment. You can practice your own religion. Your beliefs are yours, etc. There should be some separation of church and state. Now, I don't think, from my perspective, as somebody who dislikes government force, I don't really think that I can, although I somewhat agree with you, I don't really think it is reasonable for me to say that because I don't believe in something that I have the right to stop somebody else. That I know better than them how they should live their lives and what.
Well, let's go. There's a difference between a contractual right and an inalienable right. Right? One's under the civil technically, and the other's constitutional, God-given. If a state, I think Utah was one of the first, wants to recognize civil marriage, right, and civil contracts, just because of issues of fairness, right? That's up to them, and I don't care. It should be a state issue anyway. But it's not. There's nothing in the Constitution that guarantees gay rights or anything. Even though the Supreme Court has decided that, it's not a fundamental. It shouldn't be a fundamental right. It's not enumerated.
If you agree that people should be able to enter into the contractual agreement, which is what a marriage is, it's a marriage contract, right?
Well, but there's a difference between the covenant relationships and the contract relationship.
You're trying to say that a marriage where two people, show up to the church and they make a promise to each other in front of their families and a promise to and in front of God
and God,
right? That is a different type of relationship, but legally
speaking, because God's involved, right?
But legally speaking, just from mere mortal laws are concerned, this is a contractual relationship. And
according to the state,
saying that you can recognize one and not the other, depending on what state you are. Let's just say, for example, that Utah said we're not going to recognize it. California says we are. So somebody gets married in California, right? So someone gets married in California, then comes to Utah. Utah says, well, look, we're not going to recognize that relationship. And this sort of goes to Mark's point about the Loving case, right? Where interracial relationships were not permitted in Virginia, and they went.
Well, there's a difference between race and gender.
Well, but the argument you're making is the same. The counter argument I'm making is the same. What do you do then?
No. There's a fundamental right not to be discriminated.
If you had it your way, and
based on race.
If you had it your way, and the state said we're not going to recognize interracial, we're not going to recognize same-sex marriages, and somebody goes to another state and gets married there, are you saying that they should have that recognized in one state and not in the other?
Oh, it's not up to me. Then it would be between the states, right? That's it. Now we're not there anymore. The United States Supreme Court has decided that there is a fundamental right for gay
Well,
marriage.
yeah, but people like Clarence Thomas is saying, well, maybe we should have a look at that. Should the Supreme Court have come in and made that rule? Look, I think
Based on the
legislation-
rationality and in the Roe, he's probably right. There is no fundamental right in the Constitution for people of the same sex to be married. Because it's not an inalienable right, there is no fundamental right. And he would be right. That would be true. So then it would be up for the states to decide that question. Most states now have already decided that question. And because of issues of fairness and comedy and fair play. So I don't know if even that's an issue anymore.
I think the majority of people across the country would, and really across the Western world, believe that gay marriage should be legally permitted. I think how you get that and enshrine it into law is a different argument. I don't think the Supreme Court should have been used to do it, but it certainly needs to be codified better than what it currently is, in my opinion.
Constitution could have been amended. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just like in abortion.
Yeah. You could have done what Australia did. We had a non-binding plebiscite that was voluntary. as a recommendation to Parliament.
The United States will not follow Australia.
And I know that I was just going to bring this up because I know that a lot of times we think of ourselves as meaning the United States as definitely having some Puritan values, or that being part of our founding fathers' background and all of that. I don't think anybody has argued that and has thought differently in that respect. But there are even some things, Dan, that I think you would agree that are in the Bible that are not seen as being all that well approved even on this particular day, because I know that there are some levirate marriages in the Bible, which is actually when a woman is given to her brother-in-law in marriage and things of that nature. And there are some concubine relationships in the Bible, which a lot of people do not approve of. And there are some other types of relationships that exist in the Bible that folks definitely would not approve of in this day and time. Even in Deuteronomy, there is cases of male rapists being given their victims as their wives and all along those lines. And so definitely there's some things that are in the Bible that I don't think would be approved in the modern day 21st century.
But there's some things like plural marriages that existed throughout the Bible.
Yeah,
and for whatever reason,
the Old Testament.
Yeah, right, through the Old Testament. For whatever reason, politically, it's been banned, but not logically. It should not have been banned. So I think the governments are eventually going to have to change their position on plural marriages. I think.
There has to be enough people wanting this, though, Nick, and I don't think it's there yet.
What would you say, Shaquille?
There has to be enough people wanting it to change, and I don't think you're there yet. I don't think the polygamy.
You're talking about the federal level. If it goes down to the state, northern Arizona, southern Utah, that may not be true. So, and it's not. There's nothing in the Constitution that deals with plural marriages, just like gay rights or abortion. So send it to the states and let them do this.
That's a funny position that you have there, Nick, given that you believe another one of those God-given rights that don't exist anywhere in the Bible, the right to carry firearms, and yet you believe, although it doesn't say that you can't have, a rocket launcher or whatever it was that Biden said, although it doesn't say you can't have it, you all of a sudden believe that the Constitution doesn't allow you to have these things. They should ban assault weapons. You seem to be contradicting that position now on another issue.
We're not talking about weapons of mass destruction, Shaquille. We're talking about people entering into plural marriages. There's a big difference.
Well, I would say
that you carrying a bazooka.
I would say that allowing
and a group of people in Arizona engaging in plural marriages.
I would say that allowing a man to have more than one wife would be the same as using a
bazooka. Is she still running around with a bazooka?
Well, hey, that's probably true. But hey, Shaquille, under Islam, can't you have 3 wives?
What?
Up to 3 wives?
What are you asking me for?
Well, I mean, you understand that better than I do. That's why I'm asking you.
I think it's 4, the same as LDS used to be. I think, but I'm
no.
not.
Well, there wasn't any number of LDS
because don't some of the royal family members of the Middle Eastern countries don't some of them have like 7 and 8 and 9 wives and stuff?
I don't know. That's why I asked you.
I don't know.
And so there are some faiths that still do practice plural marriage.
That's right.
I went
Yeah.
to Anglican.
I think
Sorry.
really what it
I went to
was.
Bible study then.
Hey, speaking of which,
it's
because we have
basically
breaking news
old
coming from
Protestant
Russia, which actually
Puritan
involves gun control.
impact.
How's this going to be interesting?
Oh.
Gun control coming out of Russia, which is in the middle of a war with Ukraine. Because apparently earlier today, like in just a minute ago and everything, at least 13 people were killed, including 9 children, when a gunman wearing a T-shirt with a red swastika opened fire on Monday in a school in the central Russian city of Ishivet, which apparently is being investigated right now. So apparently they're having a gun issue as well. So that had took place just recently. It literally just came across the news that they're having one of those gun violence incidences like we have had as well. So definitely they're saying that it does not appear to be connected with a spate of violence in recent days that followed Russian President Vladimir Putin's declaration of a partial military mobilization. But definitely
Well, you're telling me the guy was wearing a swastika.
gun shooting.
What I find,
The guy was wearing a
has gone a
swastika. He
bit,
did the world no good.
what I find has gone a bit obscure lately, which I hopefully Sasha will weigh in on this. One, Putin making a suggestion that he might nuke the UK. That's not a good idea, Putin. I mean, you don't want to poke the bear back. But the Russian Orthodox Church has argued that sacrificing life in war against the Ukraine washes away all sins. I'll just read the first paragraph. It's the highest representative of the Orthodox Church in Russia, Patriarch Kirill, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, has maintained in a sermon this Sunday that the sacrifice in the fulfillment of military duty in the war against Ukraine washes away all sins. That's just an outrageous.
That guy's a nut.
To suggest that and say that you're a representative of God, that's. I don't support that. Sasha, what do you think of this nonsense?
Well, in Russia, historically, for the last 800 some years, the church was always dependent on state. The state is number one, the church is number two, very distant number two. It started actually with adoption of Christianity, also Orthodox Christianity, but still it was adopted by, at that time, Kiev Tsar with the name Vladimir. Same Vladimir again. And so he adopted that from Byzantium, and then he started to spread it all over his people in Ukraine. And it wasn't peaceful protest. There was a lot of people who didn't care about this Christianity, but slowly he prevailed. So the Christianity is not what happened in the West when Rome in some 300 years, 312 maybe, I think so, is when Constantine adopted Christianity as a government religion. But he had to do it because there was a huge upheaval from the people who already the Christianity spread so much in this, say, 300 years or so, that he had no chance, but he had to adopt it as a government religion. So it was a pressure from the bottom, and the king, Tsar, you want to call it him anyway, Constantine, he adopted it as a government religion. Russia is a completely different case. It's a Vladimir who adopted Christianity from Byzantium, and then he started to fight his own people so they will adopt that as a religion, and it took at least 200-300 years until it all happened. So even today's Christianity in Russia, they have a lot of old beliefs, like pagan beliefs, that mixed somewhat with Orthodox Christianity, and that's what we have today. So this, the head of Russian Orthodox Church, and there are a lot of peculiarities about his biography. Maybe he has to go to Ukraine and fight there to make sure that he'll die without sins. That's all given.
I don't think that'll work very well when he gets up to the pearly gates and says, "Look, my sins were cleansed away." I'm not sure that'll be a persuasive enough
It
argument.
won't be a great explanation. Everything. A question for everybody on the panel, because there's an agency that has, well, actually a couple of agencies. The FBI is one, CIA is another, but they have made a history of definitely being quiet and definitely doing a lot of great work in terms of government activities and all of that. And definitely one of the ways that they have done that is by not seeking public attention. But apparently the CIA is going to change. Apparently the CIA is going to change. Well, I'm just saying that's what they're claiming, that they don't like public attention. But the CIA is marking its 75th anniversary by doing something extremely rare.
Decade?
That's right. We're going to have a
Decade of
CIA.
history.
Hold on a second. We're going to have a CIA museum. And I'm going like, is that going to just bring more attention to the CIA if y'all are trying to be a clandestine organization? But they're going to have their own museum and they're going to launch a podcast. So they gave a small group of journalists, I wasn't one of them, a peek inside their newly renovated and greatly expanded museum at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. So if this is an example of government waste, I don't know what is. But the CIA is going to get its own
What
museum.
decade of government, Mark? In what decade of I'll give you 10-year windows. In what decade of government, since these agencies have existed, have they shied away from public attention?
They tried to, and they tried to do things that are, that we don't know about, that are going on to destabilize governments and to do other things. I mean, Hoover did it here with some of the civil rights organizations, and they tried to do it clandestinely and all of that. I didn't say they were effective. I didn't say they did a good job.
Well, they destabilized Trump.
You named two agencies, the FBI and the CIA. Now, we can just go decade by decade since they've existed, right? Allegations about Hoover's sexual proclivities, allegations of corruption, allegations of them colluding with the New York mafia and getting involved in government, allegations of them colluding with anti-government and anti-war protesters during Vietnam. Like, we can just go on and on and on. This huge, massive list of things that they have done quite publicly. The CIA, we could go on and on. I'm sure that Chris was here. He would certainly give you a whole list of things that the CIA have done publicly. However, as I am going to be coming back to the United States, I will say that they are both perfect organizations that have never done anything wrong.
Shaquille, but for the biggest success of CIA, you can't even believe what it is. I'll tell you what it is.
Not Afghanistan, surely.
Hold on. Think about a man who started a war in Ukraine against Ukrainian people. Number two, he threatens now the West, United States, with all his nuclear weapons and all that stuff. Number three, now he made a mobilization in Russia, highly unpopular. People are escaping any ways they can and so on. But anyway, he started a new war, not only Ukraine, West, but his own Russian people. He started war against his own Russian people. It could be possible only if he became agent of CIA to make so much stuff and so quickly. So CIA did a fantastic job by making Putin its agent, because he inflicted to Russia absolutely irreparable damage.
The similar arguments have been made about Saddam Hussein, about Osama bin Laden. They were used when they were needed. And Nick's favorite Prime Minister, Nick's favorite President, Ronald Reagan, with the freedom fighters, the diverting drug money into funneling all this stuff. The CIA was behind, and I think when they accused it at one point of importing heroin in the coffins of dead soldiers from Asian countries into the United States. I mean, the CIA has been overridden with scandals since they've existed. But
Shaquille, nothing personal, just business.
That's right. But Mark, so back to the question I asked you, Mark. Can you please name a single decade that you can think of since either of these agencies have existed where they tried to stay out of the limelight?
No, I'm not a fan of the CIA or the FBI, even though I do have friends that work for, and actually a relative that works at the GBI. But I'm still going to like, wait a minute. I'm still getting over the fact that they want to get a museum 75 years later that's going to be like even making them more in the public eye and all of that. So that's where I was really going with that, because I'm going like, y'all took this long to get this whole museum, and everybody's always complaining about the misspending of government money. This seems like a very perfect example of some serious misspending that we're going to create a whole museum around.
Can you imagine going in there and looking at the exhibitions, and it's just a whole heap of, the and and other words like that, and everything else is just blacked out. You go in, here's a photo of our
redacted documents.
Redacted documents all over the place.
Here's a photograph of our operation, and all of it's just blurred out except for one tree in the background. Yeah, definitely. That's what the museum would be like. You might be able to see Donald Trump's search warrants there.
We were not at the Bay of Pigs.
We're not there. None of that. All of that will be totally retracted and everything. Speaking of which, and to one of Sasha's favorite people, Mr. Trump, who he just mentioned and everything, Liz Cheney has come out and recently, earlier today, said that if Donald Trump is the nominee, I won't be a Republican. So apparently she's threatening.
Well,
no,
not anyway. She's never been a Republican.
Dad, the Republican friends of yours, are they heartbroken? Is this something they're thinking, my goodness, how can we lose Elizabeth Cheney?
Well, depends. Now, there is another look at things. For example, in a book by Bob Woodward, he had interview with Kushner, the son-in-law of Trump. And Kushner said that by around 2018, Trump has successfully completed takeover of Republican Party. Now, Kushner is not a joker. He's not a comedian or anything. And I think that in that interview, he said what he believed actually happened. I'm not saying that it's either good or bad. It's something what actually happened. So
No,
you
that's
have to
his
live with
opinion.
that.
That's his opinion of what happened, just because he thinks
Kushner's, not
yes,
Woodward.
yes,
It's a Kushner's opinion.
just because he believes that doesn't mean it's true, right? And let's just remember that Jared Kushner is not exactly a conservative. I mean, he's always been very, very liberal. He's always been, I believe, he's always been a supporter of the Democrats. I mean, as were the Trump family. So, I don't think that's true at all.
Well, but if Trump switched from Democrats to Republican, why do you think that Kushner couldn't switch from Democrat?
Well, yeah, sure, that's true. But what you're seeing at the moment in the poll numbers, although Democrats seem to be picking up a bit, which is normal in an election year or midterm year, but you are seeing a lot of Democrats that are leaving, who are going to the Republicans, and they're actually saying this to the pollsters. They're saying that they still have the same political positions that they had 10, 20, 30 years ago, but they just don't find any room for those opinions to be expressed in the Democrats, and they feel as though the extreme side of the Democrats has more sway over the Democrats than the extreme side of the Republicans. I think that what you would argue is that Donald Trump and his MAGA supporters are the extreme side of Republicans, but I don't think they are. I think that their message resonates with a lot of people, whether you agree with him or not. A lot of people do, and I think it resonates with a lot of people. The numbers show that.
Shakil, but tell me, you were not born yesterday. You've been around for some time. Tell me, is that an asset for Republican Party? And I'm talking real Republican who, for generations were Republicans. To tell the truth, before Trump came to power, I was always Republican, and I always voted for Conservative Party in Canada. But tell me, do you think it's a huge asset for Republicans to have someone like Trump who went through January 6th, all these lawsuits in Georgia, in New York, criminal and civil, and if there are no other people, or let's say Republican would adopt some kind of a rule that except Trump while he's alive, nobody else can be a leader of Republican Party. Okay, then you have to go through with that and do whatever you can. But you don't have such a rule, right? So is it an asset to have someone like Trump?
look, I think yes and no, Sash, and let me tell you why. Right, you don't like him. We know that, right? I don't dislike him. I'm not saying I like him. I just don't dislike the man, right? I just look at him from his policies. Okay. I think that what's really happened is that coming out of the Obama years with Hillary there was a real feeling amongst people of, are we really going to go from Bush to Clinton to Bush, take a short break and go back to Clinton again? Is that really what we're going to? Is it just going to be more of the same? The other Republican frontrunners were people like Jeb Bush. So when Donald Trump came in the 2016 election, he talked about things that I think resonated with people that wouldn't ordinarily vote Republican. They were people that would ordinarily follow the unions and vote for Democrats. So that became something that, he was loudmouthed, he was aggressive, he attacked politicians, he attacked the political system, that sort of thing. And I think that resonated with a lot of people. Big media and the actors, and all the celebrities sort of railed against him, which made him the underdog in the fight, which resonated even more with a lot of people. And so a lot of people voted for him, I think, one, because they just liked his tenacity. But I think a lot of people voted for him because they didn't think he was going to win. And it was more of a protest vote than anything else. And that's why I think he got quite a few surprising results. Once he got into power, he had a very, very hostile relationship with the press. Now, I think that if he had the same policies as he did, but he had the kind of personality as somebody like Ronald Reagan, he would have gone much further. But he may not have actually won the election in the first place. So what do you do? So I think that what's happened is, at this point now, the people that have voted for him, or the people that are unhappy with what the Democrats have delivered, are sitting there in America saying, you know what, I think that the system has been against this bloke. They're going after his finances. They're going after his taxes. They're going after this. They're going after that. They're blaming him for things like not wanting to certify the election, challenging the election results. They're attacking him over January 6th. But, they don't say anything about the Black Lives Matter protests, the riots, etc., etc. So there's a lot of people out there that are saying, you know what, I don't actually sit with the Democrats either. And so, you know what, I actually liked the economy under Trump. I liked at least thinking, even if I didn't like the man, at least thinking that he was actually on my side. And I think that is probably the asset that he brings to the Republicans. Now, do I think that he's the best candidate to move forward? Probably not. Unfortunately, I think he'll make a run for it. But I would like to see someone like Ron DeSantis have a go, because I think he would be fantastic. It's an unfortunate thing for Florida, because Florida effectively loses him. And he may not be ready to do that yet. But I think the Republicans do need to have somebody who's a bit younger and a bit more sort of, humorous and charming and, all those things that you need to be. The Democrats as well, I think that they need to do the same thing. The Democrats are very old. You've got Nancy Pelosi, is she 80-something? Biden's old. Former Democrats like Trump are old. The Clintons have been there forever. I mean, these people are getting old. Where's all the new blood? And there is actually some young people, a lot of young people in the Democrats, but you're not really seeing them. Their voices are drowned out by the young people like AOC and the Squad, or the older people that are acquiescing to those younger people. So Democrats as well have really got to get back in touch with those core values, making sure that big corporations don't take advantage of their workers and all those sorts of things that Democrats stood for. They need to get back to those core values. I think leave some of these social issues aside for a while, let people deal with them rather than weighing in on that divisive stuff. Dan, what do you think?
I agree 100%. I think that's right. I think it's because of the divisiveness that Trump creates, it would be better if he were not the Republican nominee, but his message resonates.
He could be the VP.
And Make America Great. The policies resonate. They were successful in spite of all of the allegations and all the crap the Democrats tried to pull while he was president. So, he's got a raw deal. I mean, everybody knows it. And all the crap that he's facing now legally is as a result of the Democrats still hating him. And so, he's the only president that has done worse financially after leaving the White House than any other president. Well, you know why? Because everybody's trying to kill him peaceably financially.
Well, we can continue
and
this.
So, it's like, shut up, go give your speeches, make a lot of money, and go off to the sunset and support DeSantis.
Dan, you're very eloquent, especially that he's
Well,
done
we can,
more financially than anybody else. But there is a calculations being done that Trump, recently he paid a retainer $3 million to his lawyer. As the reason for $3 million retainer is because all his life he never paid lawyers and he always cut them short. So he's paid retainer $3 million. Now, calculation is that he's not going to go to jail, by the way. Don't worry, he's not going to go to jail. But he will be entangled in all kind of legal proceedings, the criminal, the legals, and all others in all states and federally and so on, until the rest of his life. And by the time that he's through with that, his life including, he will be absolutely penniless. There will be nothing left to anybody.
well, we've got to wrap up and we can come back on tomorrow to talk more. They all have moved to the Economics Monday, which is going on right now and everything. And they might even want you over there. That's what that link was and all of that. But one of the things that I was going to bring up, which we can talk about hopefully on Economics Monday, or y'all can, because I've got some calls that I've got to make and all of that before we go on to the media show, is that a lot of folks are looking at signs of what's going on with the recession, including the British pound plummeting to a record low against the dollar. And also apparently the U.S. is looking at the 4-day work week as well. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what folks' thoughts are and all in that space. But get ready to wrap it up right here. And maybe I will have to head over to the Economics Monday since we're seeing what else is going on in that space also. But right now, get ready to end it right here, and we'll see what's going on at Economics Monday. I know they'll have a fascinating discussion and all along those lines. And we'll be back tomorrow with more great news discussions and analysis and all along those lines. So that's some of what was going on in the world. We hope that you enjoyed this particular broadcast, and we're going to get on out of here and get on to the next show, and of course into our regular other programs as well. But right now, let's call it a day and another edition of World Edition. I do believe Steve Rao will be back on tomorrow, but I enjoyed the discussion. I hope y'all did as well. We'll catch you on the flip side.